there were certain families in this organization, if you can call it an organization, that were targeted. And I believe my family was one of them because there was so much torture. And one of my earliest memories of the cults is watching my 3 little siblings, hearing them sitting inside of oil barrels in isolation, not allowed to get out, crying in the open air in Wisconsin, getting eaten alive by mosquitoes, having to go to the bathroom, peeing in their pants, defecating themselves, crying for their mother, crying for their father. Quite chilling to think that he sent our parents out on purpose so he could whip a room full of kids and humiliate us. And then this man took these pictures and showed them to everybody. He was on fire. Like I've never seen such an obsessed, it's like he was possessed by a demon. He paraded them around. He called me a whore. He called me the devil. He was showing these pictures to my siblings, to the fathers, to the little boys, to the big boys. It was the most disgusting exploitation of my private property that can be imagined. There was something really deep in me that knew that if I go back there, I am going to die.
Hey, my name is Shalise Ansola, and this is Cults to Consciousness, where we discuss leaving high-demand religions or organizations and finding healing and independence through awareness and true individual sovereignty. If you're only listening and you'd like to see our faces, we would love it if you would go to YouTube and interact with the post, liking, sharing, of course, commenting, leaving those words of encouragement for our guests who are bravely coming on and sharing their stories. It just means so much to us. It boosts the algorithm. It helps everybody. And subscribing really tells us and the algorithm that you are becoming advocates for these people, which means a lot too. So today's guest, we were connected to her through someone who had reached out from our Jot form. This is a reminder, if you want to be on the show, we do have a form in our About section, which you can click on and submit. Please don't feel bad if we don't reach out. We do get a lot of submissions. So today we are talking about a cult that was started in the 60s by a man named Rama in Wisconsin. He is from India. We'll get into more of his story, but essentially he created this huge congregation of 200 to 300 people. Over the years, it became really severely abusive, and we're going to talk about a lot of those today, so please be mindful. If you need to take breaks or skip over some parts, we will put some content warnings in the chapter marks. So we are talking to someone who was born and raised in this cult and how she eventually got out and the ramifications that happened afterwards. So thank you so much for joining us, Elisabeth Gronval.
Thank you so much, Shalise. It's a wonderful opportunity to be here and speak to you and to raise awareness about cults.
Yeah, well, and yours specifically. So it was so interesting. I had 2 submissions from someone who we haven't recorded with yet and Martha. And it took me a while, but then I was like, wait a second, this is the same group that I had never heard of before. But then both of them just on their own submitted without even talking to each other. And I thought that was really cool. And then they connected me to you because of some support groups for this group. And when I was reading through some documents about what this man had done or is doing, I don't know how he is today. This is still an ongoing group, but at least in the past and when you were in it, how extremely abusive and sadistic and awful and controlling and manipulative it was. And so I'm really happy that you're willing to come on and share, because I know it can be difficult, and also just bringing awareness and eyes to this group that I think is virtually unknown at this point.
Yeah, and it's kind of surprising because, well, first let me introduce myself. I'm Elisabeth Gronval. I'm married. I'm a mother. I'm a wife. I'm an attorney. I've been an attorney for 20 years. I'm a naval officer. I'm a judge in the Navy.
Wow.
Yeah, I have spent a lot of time recovering and succeeding. So I think that what I want to do today is raise awareness about groups like this and how they exist under our nose, and then to potentially give a lot of hope to people. Hope is my middle name after all, but I do want to give hope to people for recovery, because I have fully recovered. I still battle with some things, but let's talk about it. Let's talk about it.
Yes, that's so great to hear. And I love that. And we definitely are going to get more into your success story as we get to the end. And I'm glad that you mentioned that you are a success story. You absolutely are. You totally have that boss bee lawyer vibe, and I love it.
Working on it.
Very to the point, like, let's uncover this group and let's expose them. So Let's talk a little bit about the leader just briefly. I know we have in a previous video, but for those who aren't familiar, who is Rama and why did people follow him?
So Rama Behera was his name, and he was originally from India. He was born and raised in India, and then he came here to the United States, according to what I've figured out and what we have deciphered post-escape from the cult, I guess. So a lot of the things that we were told were not true, but anyway, he went to Columbia University, I think as an engineering student, and he did not graduate. So I think what happened was that he might have failed out or dropped out, but he went back to India, and then that's where he met his future wife. And she was the daughter of missionaries from Minnesota. And he then hooked his train to that wagon and decided to come back to the United States. He married her. They came back to the United States. And during his time, his early time as Rama Behera in the United States, I think he had identified that American people, with our freedom of religion, don't have a state-run religion where people are forced to act a certain way as a matter of routine. So he identified that people were a little bit lost. It was the 60s. It was the civil rights era. Context matters for all of this. And there was a huge influx and interest in Eastern medicine, Eastern religions, Eastern ways of life. And a lot of that is really great, enlightenment and becoming more in touch with our mental health and our ethereal selves in the quantum realm, whatever it might be. So meditation, yoga. And I believe he found an opportunity. And so Rama Behera married a woman, and I'm not going to name anybody else except him in this whole thing. So don't worry. He came to the United States, married this woman. They had a couple of children, and he was very charismatic. He converted to Christianity. Not sure about the genuine nature of that or not. The Christian religion is inspiring. There's a lot of good things about it. And he had a Christian conversion. So in that era, in the 60s, there was a lot of discontent with structured and organized religion. And my parents, my dad especially, were among the group of people that were looking for something besides the traditional structure that they had been raised in. So then that is who he is. He came to the United States. I think he started out in Minnesota. Then he found himself a piece of property in Wisconsin, and that's where he ultimately settled for a while.
Okay. And that's where the compound was.
Yes. The compound where he lived was originally just a little ranch level house. And then on the back side of it, I think it had a walkout basement at one point. But what was built onto the back was a huge structure. It was made out of steel. There were no windows. It was a very interesting sort of structure in retrospect. But ultimately, it was built by the people that joined his group. And with their money, with their time, with their labor, it was a huge enclosed, dark compound. And it was on multiple acres. So I think an estimated acreage might be 10 to 30. I'm not exactly sure what the acreage was, but there were fields and there was a pond, and it was spacious.
And did you and your family travel to this compound every weekend for the sermons?
We did. So we lived in Minnesota, and we would travel for 6 hours one way every Friday night typically. And we would go, and then by Saturday morning, we would wake up early and go to Saturday morning religious services with him as the pastor, the leader, or whatever you want to call him. And he would give sermons and preach what he preached. And then in the early stages, it was very labor intensive because there was a lot of labor to be done. And so the adults at the time would go and work doing whatever they were doing, digging trenches, laying new plumbing, running electricity, hard labor, because it was a part of Wisconsin that was very clay. So it was very hard soil. And so even in the wet times, like it was really hard to dig the dirt, but it was just all free labor. So everybody was there to serve, and everybody did that. And then they would get together at noon, and they would have a prayer service. And then in the evening, there would be another prayer service. But those were kind of the early days where it was heavy religious intensity and a lot of brimstone and fire. The members of the group were a community. And so I would say all of these people that remained, because there were plenty of people that left, but all of the people that remained really became entrenched in each other and their families together, and their children were raising their children together. And it became its own dynamic.
So, for those who aren't familiar or have watched Martha's interview, she talked about where this compound is just this giant open room, and then people would bring sleeping bags sometimes to sleep there. There were no beds, there were no bathrooms in there, that the conditions were just really horrible for its members. But if they even asked to go to the bathroom, they could be publicly shamed or abused in some way. Did you experience anything like that?
Absolutely. And I think I'd kind of take it for granted at this point because there was so much torture that happened that the least of your tortures was if you were forced to pee your pants. Like it's just the least of it because there was whippings with shortened electrical cords, like that industrial electrical cord that's flat and encased in like a white rubber. And it would bend to the shape of your back. And I really think, okay, so to back up a little bit, there's indoctrination that happened to our parents. And our parents were people that all grew up in the United States of America in typically religious families, and they all had like some kind of religious ethic. And they joined this cult to get some other different structure, some other different sort of community, and they brought themselves. And they all loved each other, cared for each other. And I believe that this man was simply there to take their money and to, torture children because that's what he enjoyed. And it is absolutely the common thread that goes through the entire scope of his, 50-year experience with all of these people. And so generations of people have been involved in this. So to get back to the point, yes, I did witness a lot of torture. And one of my earliest memories of the cults, it's probably my second earliest memory, is watching my 3 little siblings hearing them sitting inside of oil barrels, not in isolation, not allowed to get out, crying in the open air in Wisconsin, getting eaten alive by mosquitoes, having to go to the bathroom, peeing in their pants, defecating themselves, crying for their mother, crying for their father. And my mother, I remember her just crying, and she felt like she couldn't do anything about it because the thing that was scary about this cult leader is that everybody at that point just listened to him. So if he struck violence on somebody, maybe he wouldn't do it himself unless it was a child, but if it was an adult, he would just sick other adults on them or teenagers. So nobody was safe. And it's just a hopeless, sad trauma that these children had to go through. And one of my earliest memories, and it's just sad. It's like, but I didn't know better. Children don't know better. That's the thing, is like children born and raised in this sort of environment, they're fresh slates. They don't know better. Mm-hmm. They might know in here, like something in here is bothering me about this, but they don't know the laws. They don't know what child abuse is. They don't know, because if nobody defines it for you, that's why awareness campaigns are so important. And if you can tell a child, this is what's right, this is what's wrong, but it was never taught as it was wrong. So this torture was totally tolerated and accepted by my siblings' own parents.
Wow. The level of which your parents had to have been so completely indoctrinated to ignore their parental instincts and not intervene when their child is being hurt. I can't even imagine that. There's nothing a child could do that would make you abuse them and that'd be okay. But in his mind, what are they doing that's so awful?
I think their offense was being Gronvals, to be honest, because not every child was treated this way. And this is an important point because there were certain families in this organization, if you can call it an organization, that were targeted. And I believe my family was one of them. And I don't know what it was about my family. Maybe it was the fact that we were too independent-minded. I mean, I don't know. I'm not the cult leader, but I do think that he saw something about us that was potentially threatening to him. And he specifically targeted my brothers, and he particularly targeted my sister. And I think that I was spared some of the targeting because I was a target of another kind. I think, based on everything I know as a former sex crimes prosecutor, and as somebody who understands victimology and predatory behavior, that he was grooming me. So I watched it, and I'm a middle child. I'm empathic. I love my siblings like nobody else. And I think that he just targeted our family. My father, this is probably why. My father was a very submissive man. My father has served him, still serves him today. My father is the only one of the Gronvals that's still left there. My mother is a strong woman, though she gave her power to her husband, and then her husband gave his and her power to the cult leader. So I think there was a whole dynamic going on where the potential was great for my mother to be somebody that was threatening. My father was absolutely somebody that cult man needed to control, and all of us were their progeny. So it was a absolute target situation, and most of my siblings were targets their whole existence there.
Okay.
It was sickening. And some other families experienced the same targeting.
Okay. So when you say that you felt like he groomed you and targeted you in a specific way, can you elaborate on that?
Yes, I noticed at a young age that I was spared some of the punishments that my siblings got. So some of my siblings would be like on Sunday nights, we would all get our winter clothes on or whatever season it was, and we would say goodbye to the cult leader until next weekend. And as his goodbye to my little brothers, for example, they'd be standing there. They're a year and 2 years younger than me. I remember watching them stand there with their little jackets on and their little boots and their little buzz haircuts with their mouths open because he'd be like shooting Tabasco into their mouths. And sometimes it would miss, and sometimes they would choke, and sometimes their heads would move and it would hit them in the eye. And they would cry, and they would cry, and they would cry, and they were sad. And if they, it was just fun for him. He laughed. He's a sadist. At the time, I knew it was sad. I didn't know it was wrong. I didn't know the purpose of it. I'm a child. Like, how do you know? But this is the routine behavior that they had to experience. I didn't ever get that. I never got the whippings. I didn't get most of it because I was a sweet, compliant, cute little girl that I think he targeted. I think he had a twinkle for me, and it's really sick to feel that, but I do think that because of what happened later in my life.
So were there any memories that you'd like to share from your time when you were a child before we get into your teen years?
So memories, I will say that the community that we formed with the other children that were born into this group, and even some of the other parents that had kind hearts, I do remember fondly some of the parents that were just kind. There were other parents that were kind of into the sadism as well, and so they took on that whole disciplinary let's corporal punish our children to extreme ends. So as a child, we knew like who was scary and who wasn't, and who was nice and who wasn't. But then and who you were safe with and who might betray you, if you will. But everybody was just there trying to survive his game. But some of the memories I have, my best memories, ironically, are the memories of working with all of these other children doing this really hard labor out in the fields, because you know what? You weren't getting beaten. You were just working. You were enjoying the sun. You were talking to each other. You were having a good time. And don't have too good of a time, because if someone catches you having a good time, then you're going to get punished. So it was all like, if anybody comes around who's going to tell on you, then you should probably hide your fun. But we also secretly had some fun. And I would say those were some good memories I had, but most of the memories were just dread and doom. And Fridays were the worst day of the week, because you're going to get in that car, you're going to go to Shawano, Wisconsin, where he's was located. I think he's absconded from that place at this point. And you were going to get, who knew? Who knows what trauma would afflict you this weekend, but it was going to be bad, and it was going to be ugly, and your parents were going to be humiliated, and you were going to get beaten, and you'd have to work hard. And I remember being a little girl. This is one of my most acute memories. Is I'm a human that requires a lot of water. And if I don't get enough water, I get a migraine. And when I get a migraine, I sit on the ground, or I feel like I have to throw up. Obviously, as an adult, I manage that. But as a child, I didn't know that. So I'd be working so hard in the fields. We didn't have any access to water. We weren't allowed to have a water jug. It was a luxury to have a water jug. So if you think of all these children, like pulling branches to a brush pile, pulling weeds out of a garden, wheelbarrows of dirt. But I was little at the time. So I wasn't allowed to drink water. So I inevitably, every Saturday, I would get this splitting migraine and I would feel like I was going to die. And I would sit down by a tree and I would literally throw up. And finally someone would say, just go find your mother. And then I would go find my mother and she would give me a cold washcloth. She'd give me a piece of bread. She'd give me some water and she'd make me feel better. I'd go to sleep and then I'd wake up and then I wouldn't have a migraine. It was this torturous, ridiculous cycle that was just, this is me. I'm one person and I was not even among the most tortured. So if someone did that to my child one time, first of all, all right. So we can do the coulda, woulda, shoulda and the 2020 hindsight. There's no point. I would say that was, our parents were not allowed to watch over us. Our parents were not allowed to be around us. They accepted the not allowed.
Did he purposely isolate the children so the parents wouldn't see ways in which he was torturing them?
100%. And I didn't know that at the time, but when we have, as adults, talked to our mother, my father is still there and he won't talk to us and we don't exist to him. But Cal Gronval has 9 children, okay? My mother never knew this stuff was happening. She had no idea. It wasn't until I was an adult talking to her about it that I realized how sinister that was. The only adults that were there were his servants. And I'm not saying that word as if they were his servants. They were people he pressed into service using the guilt of righteousness and service to God. And they were women that lived with him, and they might have been the only ones around. And it's quite chilling to think that he sent our parents out on purpose so he could whip a room full of kids and humiliate us.
This man clearly had or has so much control over these people to get them to accept this type of behavior and abuse. What were some of the things that he was saying to really concrete this idea that he has the ultimate authority over everybody?
So he claimed that his calling was brought to him by a golden pillar of light in his apartment in New York City or something like that. And that he was one of 2 prophets on earth who was going to save the planet, save people from hell.
This sounds like the Mormon story. Like, did he read something out of the Mormon Bible, a pillar of light in New York City?
Maybe. I mean, and this is the power of communication. I've never heard that was a Mormon thing, but if it is,
it is.
It's that he maybe took a book out of that playbook. I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
But it was something that we all believed, because if you think about it, religion is interesting. And now religion, what I'm saying religion is like the set of rules that is in a certain name, like the Lutheran religion.
Dogma.
Yeah, the dogma. So, but if you think about it, like people can have spiritual experiences where they see a pillar of light, or maybe they feel an overwhelming feeling of joy, or something lifts them up and inspires them. That's all good and fine. But then when you have a pillar of light appear to you and tell you you're a savior on earth, do you think you should go and like torture children and divide families and tear people? It doesn't make sense. And so I say that though outside, because now I'm 47 years old. I've had a lot of time to process this. I've recovered fully, and I'm not fully, but I'll be recovering for probably the rest of my life. But part of my recovery is like truth. Let's look at the truth. What is the truth? And all religions that are so severe and extreme have control in common, because a truly good, spiritually connected religion should never try to control the thoughts of somebody, because we all know we have brains, we have hearts, we have pineal glands, there's the quantum realm, we have God, we have source. I am a woman that believes in source. I believe in the spiritual realm. I believe in all of that. And I don't need a religion to have that, to have the power of that. I just have to what's true, what's not true. And we all have an internal compass on does that feel like it's wrong, right? Resonate? No, resonate. We just have to practice using it. And so this guy, I think, got really perverted by power, by money, by servitude. And what we found out later is that he is sexually abusing all these young ladies that joined his group looking for salvation. And what a monster. And so you don't know any of that when you're in there because nobody's going to tell you. Because here's one of the things that is all in the indoctrination. There were plenty of people that joined and then left this cult. When they left the cult, a lot of them didn't say anything because maybe they just felt like shame or happy that they were free. I don't know, and that's fine. But then the brave souls that did say something to the police were ostracized and excommunicated and demonized like nobody else. And there were a couple of teenagers, I think they were teenagers when their parents joined the cult, and they left and they said, you know what, this is wrong. This is abusive. And those two were excommunicated by their family in short order and were talked about. They were called Judas, they were called Satan, they were called devils. And all of us little children understood then, you don't say anything. You don't criticize. You don't even think a thought about this cult leader, as angry as you might be, as sad as you might be, because he's a man of God and he's the only way, the truth, and the light. And it's just, it's such a mind twist, and it's such a lie. And that's the problem, is that when you become indoctrinated as a child. So what I refer to, like my parents' generation, when they joined, I will call that like generation 1. I'm generation 2 solidly. We are all in our 30s, 40s, 50s. Every one of us was born and raised into that cult. And we don't know any different. Like my parents, when they joined, they had been Lutheran and they knew, like, communities that weren't whipping their children, that's the part that confounds me a lot. And I forgive them because who am I not to forgive them? And they live with that. If I could say anything to my father, I would just say, there's nothing that he did that he can't be forgiven for and can't recover from. That's what I will say. I'll just leave it at that. But my mother is a lovely, lovely human. And, like I said earlier, she just gave up her power to her husband. And then her husband gave up both of their power to this cult leader.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I veered a little bit off your question, but
no, that's okay. It's all great information. What I wanted to ask after talking about how he was able to gain so much control is, you're 6 hours away and you're in public school, but you physically look very different because of the really intense dress codes and standards.
Mm-hmm.
How did that make you feel going to a public school? And maybe describe a little bit of what was expected of you as a kid and how you had to act.
Dressing. We used to be called Little House on the Prairie. So us girls were, we had to wear our hair back, and we had to wear it in braids or a bun. And then we had to wear these little like Peter Pan collar shirts and skirts. So no pants, and I grew up in the 80s, and Zubaz and plastic charm bracelets and Madonna. Like, think about this. Like, I was the most ridiculous. I don't judge me. No, I was probably a little cutie, but I'm going to tell you, we were very different. And my brothers all had like these little buzz cuts, and they would be called toothpick and Q-tip and whatever. So no, we were not allowed to be worldly or fit in. My particular experience was, people would ask me questions, and like the mean girls would say mean things about my clothes, but, we had no choice. I couldn't go buy myself some Zubaz, So I was a smart kid, and I was a good kid, and I was athletic. So I think that helped. But I know like my brothers took a whole lot of gaff because people picked on them, and everybody knew my dad's story because he was a high school teacher in the town, and he had lost his job because he was teaching this crazy religion at school and, recruiting high school kids. So he lost his job. Yeah. So we were all known in the town as who we were. And we looked different. So obviously that helps. But my experience was okay. I mean, I was a smart kid that got along with a lot of people, but I know my brothers experienced a lot of humiliation. One of my younger sisters too.
Yeah. So I think you had mentioned before we started filming, you were a little bit rebellious. Was that something that happened because you were trying to push back and you were trying to fit in?
No, I think I was. So if you would ask my mom or my siblings, like, I'm the sweet one and the compliant one, but I always had my own thing. Like, I don't know why. I guess I was blessed with that, where I always had my own ideas about things and I had my own way, and I just was trying to survive. So I survived. I would call myself a survivalist, and then I survived. But then at a certain age, I haven't really thought about this before, but I think at age 13, when I started getting publicly humiliated in this cult for being a whore, which
Oh,
he called me. Yeah, well, we can talk about that. But
yeah.
I think that was when I started having that experience where I was like, wait a second, who am I and what am I? And it very slowly lit the fire of this isn't what I want. This isn't who I'm going to be. But it was never that defined until I actually left. But I would say that started inherently in me because there was something in me already. And this is what I would say to anybody: pay attention to what's in you, because what's in you is what's true. And if you can hear yourself and trust yourself, pay attention, because if something feels wrong, it's wrong.
Yeah.
And if it feels right, it's right.
Yeah, that intuition is so important and something that is often completely shut off and or
Totally.
demonized in these high control groups, because if you listen to your intuition, you won't be under their spell anymore, and they can't have that. They need robots, they need people who just will give blind obedience and follow. I mean, you have people who are in an abusive cult and not saying anything and continuing to obey. That's high level, maximum level of control and manipulation. So let's talk about this. What happened when you were 13?
So there came a time, and this was as we were growing up. So this would have been the early 90s, early 90s. I was a preteen, and there were a couple of young teenagers, girls, who had been invited to join the royalty, I suppose, inside of the cult leader's house. And so it was such a privilege because we were not allowed to go in there, not from day one. Like I don't think I ever saw the upstairs of his house, which where, the house is where he lived, and then the compound is where the rest of us could be. So there were a couple of girls who were teenagers of the older siblings of some of my peers, and they had been invited to be a part of his household. And so that was such an honor, and they were revered and worshiped, and that was kind of the goal for everybody, is they just wanted to be like in the inside circle. And so at some point, I think he identified me as somebody that he wanted to put in there. And so he said, you could be the next, and he named their names. And I was like, well, that's quite the honor. And I was like a favored one. And so there were a couple of weeks. I think I was 12 or 13. I don't remember the exact age, but I remember I was in 8th grade. And so maybe 13, 14. But I was asked, or he told me that I should stay during the week, because normally my family would come and go. Friday night they would come, and Sunday night they would go home. And so what an honor. So I was like, okay, sure, I'll stay. And I was homeschooled at the time because my parents were told to pull me out of public school. So I was homeschooled. And so I stayed at his house, and I would stay inside the basement of his house. And I would do my studying during the day, and I would get my meals, and then I would go to sleep at night out in the main compound area. And at one point, after about I think it was 2 or 3 weeks of being there, it was a Friday night, and I knew my family was coming, and he invited me to sleep in his house rather than sleep in the compound area. And he said, it's your choice. So I decided to go sleep in the compound area because I wanted to see my siblings, because they were my favorite people on earth, and it was the highlight of my week. Because otherwise I was just in the dark all week, kind of like in the dark with a nightlight, studying by the light of a nightlight. It's its own thing. But so I chose to sleep out in the main compound area so I could see my siblings first time they arrived, or when they arrived. So the next day, he discovered that I slept outside, not outside, but in the compound area. And he had this look on his face that was so confusing to me, because it was like kind of a death stare, like an anger, but it was also like a crestfallen, like sad, disappointed. It was just a weird look I'd never seen before. And it was like, that look you get when you're like, your parents find out that you robbed a bank or something. I
Right.
don't know. But like, it was really a bad look. And I was like, what is that look? And then he made a public spectacle of it. And he said, she loves her independence more than she loves God, and started calling me a whore. And I was like, what is a whore? I knew it was a bad woman. I didn't know anything else because he'd
Right.
called other people whores. And so I had to go look it up. And so I went home with my parents that next week because I was like not invited to stay. And I went home and I looked it up, and I remember just being so angry, like really sad, just heartbroken, like disappointed that this man who I thought really loved me and cared for me as my, Lord and Savior intermediary, if you will, you don't know any different as a child. And now he's calling me a whore. I don't even know what a whore is. So I looked it up. It's a woman that sells sells sexual favors for money. I was like, Mom, Dad, where is this coming from? And they were like, I'm not sure. I know that's hurtful. But maybe he sees you have a whore spirit.
Oh.
So I was so distraught. I went down to the river. I sat down by the river. I freaking cried for hours. And I was like, what am I going to do? And I like became overnight. I went from being like, you're invited into my house to now you're a whore. Like I was so devastated. So anyway, that was a moment I think where it started, where I was just like, this isn't working. Anyway, but it was a very childlike resolution. I just couldn't imagine a future there, but I didn't have any plans to leave because, that's not something you formulate at that age, I don't think.
Oh my gosh, that moment, and I'm sure you've thought of this. Do you feel like you potentially saved yourself from being abused that night?
Yeah, I do.
Or in the future?
Yes, I do. And that's in retrospect because I
Yeah.
understand it takes, okay, so the thing about grooming is that especially if it's a smart groomer, they're going to find ways to like find out your vulnerabilities, find out what you like, give you your favorite treats, move you into this, give you an honor for that. Like they're going to find a way to like make you feel like it's all your idea. And I'll just put this out there right now. If you are under the age of 18 and anybody asks you to touch them in their sexual parts or touches your sexual parts, it's illegal. Okay? That's a crime. And it is never okay. Whether you think you want it or not, it is not okay. And I think that that's what he was going to do, because then he went on to do it with other people. And then we find out he's done it with these people that joined before. I was just hairbreadth away from being victimized by him. And I fully believe that was what his intention was, because his look was not a normal look for me. And then after I became the enemy, when I chose my
Right.
independence over God, because clearly he's God, then that's when I became enemy. So it was a very interesting, I didn't understand it at the time, but right now, sitting here where I am with my life experience, I understand what it was.
Yeah, you hurt his ego, and he couldn't take that.
Yeah.
Because you could have been the first person to ever say no to him, and he was just beside himself that someone would say no. And so he had to demonize you, or else you could have given other girls ideas about not going up to sleep in his house.
That's right. That's right. And I think, I dodged a bullet there, a really big bullet, and here I am today. So I'm very thankful to the universe for saving me from that situation.
Right. So then let's talk about the years that followed that. What happened as far as you slowly kind of realizing that you didn't want to be a part of this, but trying to figure out how you would get out?
So that evolution happened, I think, organically and over time, but there were some families that lived near or at the compound full time. Our family and a lot of other families were not that. And now, mind you, this religion, if you will, evolved to be more about raising money. And there was a whole shell corporation set up to raise money for this school in India that I believe became a huge fraud. Anyway, then we found ourselves to be most useful while working. So I was working jobs like I worked at Hardee's as a young girl, and I mowed lawns, and I had a little landscaping business with my brothers, and they had paper routes. But the whole point of all of us having all these jobs was great. All these little minions have jobs and they can give us money. us. He referred to himself as us because it was he and a bunch of multiple personalities or something. So we would give money and then it would be great. And it would be great. But the thing about being in the real world is you meet people, and people that aren't in this cult are good people. And they teach you that you're amazing and you're successful and you're great. And you don't have to be in this place in order to be saved. And they don't really, we weren't talking about salvation, but you realize you can make it. Like, you can make it in the real world. And then you go to college. And the idea with getting everybody educated, and his whole philosophy for a few years was, maybe it was like 10 years, is like, get all these little second generation minions off to college and they can all be doctors and lawyers. And that was really the two professions that he really wanted us all to be, because I think those are like the big money earners in his mind. And so then we'd all become doctors and lawyers and give him all of our money. So like, if you think about it, it's like an investment. But the problem with that is that becoming a doctor or a lawyer means you're going to get educated.
Right.
And you're going to have to take general education classes. You're going to take philosophy of the world. You're going to take an art class. You're going to be exposed to people from other continents. You're going to it's a whole experience that just broadens your horizons.
Mm-hmm.
And it backfired because as people would get these educations and they had any freedom, they were not coming back. And so there was multiple second generation educated people that were like, no. This is not for me. And they made a choice because guess what? We live in the United States of America. We get to have a choice, which is great for now. So awesome. But anyway, I think I was one of the poster children for that backfire because I realized there's a lot of people in the world and there's a lot of religions and there's a lot of great people. And this whole place where I'm going every weekend sucks. Yeah. It's terrible and it's abusive and it's making me feel miserable. And I don't really need to be here, but I didn't really have those solid thoughts. I just knew I didn't want to be there because it was miserable.
Yeah. So then what happened? What was the turning point? Well, I know you told me off camera, but let's talk about, if you feel like now is the time, what happened when he completely turned on you and basically sent people to your house.
Okay, so that by itself was an evolution of sorts, but there was so one of the things that he did with the second generation was he groomed us all to be abusers for each other. And we were not to keep secrets from him, but we were to betray our fathers, our mothers, our siblings. We were never to lie to him or we would go to hell. Like it was just like this whole reign of terror. And so there was a lot of, I would say, manipulation and competition among the second generation people. And you got brownie points and you got favored and you didn't get ostracized if you would tell on somebody or betray somebody. So anyway, I just didn't play that game because I wasn't comfortable with it. I didn't like it. I thought it was mean and I didn't want to. So I just was kind of like the quiet kid and I wasn't like in the most favored group because I was a whore and I was a whore every single weekend apparently. But anyway, I was good for art and I was good for helping make furniture and put new trim in his house. I was good for construction and I was good for some things, but I wasn't good enough to be like in his inner circle anymore. And I also wasn't going to play his games. And I didn't really have that solid thought at the time. I just wasn't playing. Mm-hmm. So one time, I think I was like after college, I think I might've been 21 years old, maybe 22, but it was the summertime and I was down at one of the buildings where we did a lot of construction, like of, different furniture making and stuff like that. And there was a group of kids that were carrying wood pieces. He had his gaggle of people around him that were trying to, give him paper towels to wash his hands because he had this compulsion with washing his hands. He never wanted to be dirty. He wore complete overalls and rubber boots so he would never get dirty and he washed his hands constantly. So we had paper towel girls. Anyway, he was standing there with all these people of my generation and all these other little children of my generation were carrying wood. And he told my little brother to hit another boy who was a little brother of friends, like hit him for being lazy. And I instinctively didn't even think about it. I shouted out, "Don't you dare hit him." And my brother listened to me.
Ooh.
That was the beginning of, I think, the actual, she's got to go.
Yeah.
He walked over to me and he held my arm and he made it look like everything was okay. And then he told everybody that I was just upset. But he asked me, he's like, what's going on? And I said, he shouldn't be hitting anybody.
How old are you?
I think I was 21 or 22.
Okay.
But I was just like, no, don't hit anybody. You don't need to do that. And my brother listened to me, which was, in retrospect, that's pretty funny. And my brother remembers that because he was like, oh, who do I listen to? And he didn't listen to him. He listened to me. So I think that's when he realized, like, all right, now she's like a threat. So after that, it became like war. And then he started telling my siblings like they couldn't sit next to me, they couldn't talk to me, they couldn't hug me. And now, mind you, my very dear favorite people were my siblings, and my little ones especially. Like, I had a little sister who was born when I was 14. That was my baby. Like, not my baby, but I and she was not allowed to be around me. I was like, come on. So it was I was being excommunicated while there. So I was like, this is just, it was miserable. And I was so sad and just, and I had relationships outside of the place, and I was forced to, just ruin those relationships and lie all the time. It was terrible. I was a tortured soul. So I was like, you know what? I got to make a plan. So I decided I was going to be an artist. And one of my brothers was living in the Richmond, Virginia area because he was working for a judge at the time. And he actually helped me financially, and he helped me to leave the cult. And the weekend I left the cult, I told the cult leader, I said, thank you for all that you've taught me. I'm grateful, and I'm not coming back. And it wasn't like supposed to be a breakup. I was just saying thank you and goodbye.
Right. You were trying to leave graciously.
Yeah, trying, because, if you leave and, I wasn't planning on saying anything bad, but okay, so whatever. I was leaving, and I was going to go pursue an art career in Richmond, Virginia. So my brother moved me out there. I spent my entire life savings on a double deposit because my credit was terrible, because I gave all my money to the cult. Within the next week, when he figured out I wasn't there at the next cult weekend, he completely lost his ever-loving mind and threatened my brother, who helped me, with hell. And we were still all brainwashed at the time and indoctrinated. On some level, he believed that that would be true. And so my brother did what he was forced to do. He bought me a plane ticket, and he put me on a plane because the cult leader told him he's going to go to hell forever if he didn't. And I understood it, but I was so sad and so miserable. And when I flew it was December of 1999. And when I was sitting on that airplane, and I had just left my brother in Richmond, and he was crying and I was crying, because my whole dream, I wanted to be an artist and branch off on my own and be near my brother. And I remember flying into, sorry. I remember seeing Minneapolis as you're flying in, and I just felt like some part of my soul was going to die. I didn't know anything about a soul. I just knew something was not right. So anyway, if you don't mind, I'm going to take a little break here. I can do this.
You're doing fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you. So when I was flying into Minneapolis, I remember seeing the skyline and the beautiful buildings in Minneapolis on a crisp, like, winter day, and that it was dark and those buildings were lit up. And I just felt like I'm trying to leave, because Minneapolis was where I lived. I went to college at the University of Minnesota, and I escaped from Minneapolis, and I was never going to go back to that place in Shawano, Wisconsin. And so anyway, I went back. I don't remember who picked me up at the airport, but I do remember I just had my belongings. My weekend clothes were my skirt and my blouse and a couple, pairs of underwear maybe, and got in that car and drove with some members of the cult to the cult. And then it was like a horribly cold whatever. And then the next morning was like brimstone and fire. Like, the man came out of the door for his morning sermon screaming about what a betrayer and a devil and a whore, and just she's running off to pursue her whore stuff and blah blah blah. Like, it was so devastating, and I was so sad already. And then he just lights me up just over. I'm like, I just escaped this place, like, and now I'm back. And so Anyway, the things I did have still in my life were in my apartment in Minneapolis that I had just halfway moved out of. And my sister, I had lived with my sister. And my sister and I were roommates. We were best friends all through life. We're a year apart. And he said, I'm going to have, she needs to turn her life over to the Lord. And all of her things need to be taken from her. She needs to be stripped down to nothing. And then she can rebuild or something like that. And I was like, no. And I'd already left all my my most precious belongings in Richmond. And so he said to my sister, give me the keys to your apartment. Someone's going to go and get your things and you're going to come here and we're going to go through everything and everything that's worldly is going to be taken from her. And my sister was like, I don't want to do that. She was crying. He threatened her with physical harm. And now this was at a point where teenagers had been beating adults by his orders. Physically, my sister would have been seriously injured, harmed, killed, who knows, if she didn't hand over those keys. And so he got the keys and he gave them to 3 people, 2 of whom were first generation people and another one who was a second generation person who knew where we lived. And they went on Saturday in a truck and robbed our apartment. Everything that was in our apartment was taken out, put in bags, garbage bags, and brought back to this place, which was 4 or 5 hours away.
Even your sister's stuff.
Yes. And now we're talking everything from the little tchotchkes you have as a kid, like a little keychain, a picture, a necklace, a thimble, a whatever, to books and clothes and your college books. I mean, there was everything. My sister and I, I feel so bad for her. But what came out of that was they got back on late Saturday night, and then Sunday morning, apparently the cult leader had time to go through some of this stuff. And one of the things they found was especially private, and that is ultimately what he used to violate me so badly that I knew that he had created hell on earth for me. And I was not going to be able to live there. I wasn't going to be able to participate in this hell anymore that he created. To be really honest, and I'm exposing myself here, but I had taken some pictures because I was an artist and I was a model for some life art classes. And so I had taken some pictures of myself nude, and it was supposed to be artistic and it was private. And they were mine. And frankly, I thought I had thrown them away. Mm-hmm. But somehow when our apartment was robbed by these 3 people in the middle of the night in Minneapolis without our consent, they found those pictures and brought them. And then this man took these pictures and showed them to everybody. Oh. He displayed them around. He paraded them around. He called me a whore. He called me the devil. He was on fire. I've never seen such an obsessed, it's like he was possessed by a demon. And I was I just felt like the spine leave my body. I could not, the shame, the pain, the violation, the embarrassment. He was showing these pictures to my siblings, to the fathers, to the little boys, to the big boys. It was the most disgusting exploitation of my private property that can be imagined in front of me. And so there I am. And I realized that I needed to get out of this hell or I wasn't going to survive. And whether it was going to be him telling people to kill me, I just knew I wasn't compatible with this place. And it wasn't that calm. I just had the most out of body shame, horrible pain experience. And then I was like, when I leave this place, I'm not coming back. And my poor sister lost all of her belongings. My family was shamed for it forever. I became the name in which he invoked so much pain after I left and told so many lies about me and my brother. And I was just a girl. I just want to be an artist. I just wanted to be me.
Yeah.
I didn't do anything wrong. I was a good person. I had a good heart. I didn't want people to get hurt. And the goodness, human beings can't be good around him. He needs other people to be dirty too.
I can't, just the shame and embarrassment that would have come with that. I can't even imagine the level of which you felt. I mean, I would have wanted to crawl under a rock and die. I don't know how you got yourself through that. I think, especially in a culture where the purity thing is pushed so hard and you're in modest clothing 24/7, I can imagine that taking those photos probably felt very empowering to you because it was your decision. You were doing what you wanted with your body. You were doing something artistic and something creative, which is totally within what you should have been able to do with your own body because it's yours to make those decisions. And that complete violation of trust and that betrayal. Wow, I am just so sorry that you had to go through that. What a nightmare.
Yeah, it was a nightmare, and it became a very shameful nightmare for my family too. And this wasn't something that, I mean, and even if it was something I wanted to publish or whatever, that's my choice, but that's not what I was doing. This was my private property,
Right.
and it was exploited against me. And it was like his opportunity to really get a hold on me. And, unfortunately for him, here I am, free.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he, I think that was his obsession. I think he was obsessed with girls. He was obsessed with sex. He was obsessed with private parts. He always commented on girls' bodies. He brought some very dark pieces of whatever sadism he was a fan of, but he loved pain. And he threatened my sister a couple of times and told her that if she were in the Middle East, she would have been killed by her father and her brothers for honor's sake.
what?
And so just because she was herself, it was his way of striking fear into the hearts of women. Strong women are not compatible with that place. And here's another plug. If you have it in here that you might not agree with him, find a way out. The truth will set you free.
So when you were exploited in that way and he publicly shamed you, did he pose it as an excommunication to get you out? Was that kind of your escape?
No.
So how were you able to get out?
So he posed it as, this is the ultimate, this is how bad you are. You need to listen to me if you're gonna be saved. Listen to me. That's always what he said. Listen to us. He has, the multiples, but he would say that sort of thing. And I don't think his point was to drive me out. I think his point was to break me. And the thing is like when I left and I had just lost, $1,800 of my life savings, which for a minimum wage college student is a lot of money. I had just been shamed so badly. I was like, I'm not going back. I already tried to leave once. I can't go back. I couldn't go back because of shame.
Yeah.
And the thing about the shame was that solidified my, I'm not going back. Because it was kind of soft before, because I was like, maybe I'll go back and visit. Nope, not anymore. And so then I was so sad and so shameful. I was like, I can't come back. I'm also not going to, because I knew there was something really deep in me that knew that if I go back there, I am going to die. I mean, die. Like somebody was going to hurt me, kill me, or
Wow.
I was going to lose me to some kind of breakage or death. Like I just knew I could not go back or I was going to die. And I've had a couple moments like that prior to that in my life, which I just thank the universe and my ancestors and my angels for watching over me. There were some decision points where it was like, I just had a deep feeling like if you do this, there's no going back from this decision. And I just felt that way. And so by the grace of the universe, I got out and I did not go back. And I sent a letter by fax. Funny story. I sent a fax to one of his bookkeepers. And I said, I am not worthy. I just was like, I'm not worthy. I can't even be around my siblings. Like it's too much. I'm ashamed. I'm this, I'm that. And it was really like an act of forgiveness. Thank you, but I'm out. Like it wasn't even a breakup. It was like me just begging for like mercy, but I'm not coming back. So then I was just very alone because now my family, I was excommunicated. One of my brothers, the brother who helped me get out, he was excommunicated. He was eviscerated royally that weekend as well. He was raised up and down, and I mean like fire raised, like just torch it all. And, we all suffered because of that. And then after I left and didn't come back, I should say I didn't come back. Thank God. My sisters and my brothers were abused heavily in my name. And so a lot of lies were told about me. I recently learned that he was saying that me and my brother, who helped me leave the cult, that we had a sexual relationship.
Wow.
So he's been spreading that lie, which is gross and
Oh my
perverted.
gosh.
And that's his mind. That's a reflection of him anyway.
Yeah.
At one point, my sister was like, "You have no idea how much pain you caused me." And I was like, what do you mean? And she said, "Well, all the whippings I got and the beatings I got because of you." And I was like, "I would have protected you with my life. I didn't give you those beatings. Those were done in my name." And this is how the indoctrination happens, is because it's like, you're not going to turn out like her. She's a whore. So whip, 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 sadistic pleasure, plus indoctrination. And before you know it, like your siblings are like, she's the enemy. What did I do wrong? What did I do wrong here? And so that takes, but the thing is, what I'm saying right now takes a long time to recognize, unless you have somebody teaching it to you. And when me and my siblings got out, we each have had to go through our own journeys of recovery and realize, one light bulb at a time. Oh, that wasn't me. That wasn't my fault. That shouldn't have happened. Oh my God. And then when you have your own children, your own spouse, and you realize like what the order of things should look like, what a mutually loving relationship should be like, where does this guy fit in? Where does this little tiny little cult man who comes in with his promise of salvation and then delivers decades of abuse and exploitation, like, what? It's confounding, but that's, I know that now because I survived a cult. But if I hadn't been raised in a cult, maybe I'd be that compliant Lutheran girl who follows her husband into a cult. I mean, I'm not judging people. There's no judgment here.
Mm-hmm.
It's circumstantial, it's contextual, and I fully recognize that I was a victim of this place. And at this point, I'm a hard target.
Wow. So you were able to get out. Your siblings were suffering because of you leaving. And when were they able to actually get out? When were you reunited? I know you said all of your siblings and your mother left. So how did that happen? Just in stages?
It did. It happened in stages. It happened I think it like kind of happened one at a time. So there's 9 of us siblings. One of my brothers was in the Navy at the time that I left, and he's, the inspiration for why I joined the Navy. And I'm so glad, because 20 years later, I'm a captain in the Navy, so that's amazing. I always credit him with inspiring me. And then my older brother and I obviously were kind of shamed at the same time, and so he and I both, I don't think we were welcome. He wasn't welcome back. I don't know if I would have been welcome. I just wasn't going back. And then my oldest sister, she was out. But it took a few years for me to reach my sister, my younger sister, who I'm very close with now, and another one of my younger brothers. But my sister that was in college at the time, I sent her an email. I figured out her email address from, just formulaically, first name, last name at whatever.edu. And I emailed her and I said, you don't have to reply with any words because you're not allowed to talk to me. But I said, if you got this email, send me a blank email back, or just hit the reply button. And it took a few days, but she did. So I knew she got it. And I was in law school, and I was in Chicago, and I was suffering mightily from missing my family. These are my people, and I miss them so much, and it would make me cry. And I was very much in the throes of early recovery of this deep trauma. And so she eventually allowed me to talk to her and communicate with her. And then she left of her own volition. I hope you get a chance to talk to her.
So she's the one that you put me in touch with, right?
Yeah, she's amazing. One of my heroes, actually.
Yes, I'm really looking forward to talking to her.
So she's got an awesome survivor story. My other sister, who was a year older than me, she's a wonderful human who was turned against. We were turned against each other, frankly, and it didn't really hold because she's still an awesome person and I love her to death. But she got out a couple years after. Actually, a couple years after law school, I think, for me. I don't exactly remember the timing of everybody, but everybody like matriculated out as they all saw and realized that this place was just bunk, because it totally went through this whole turn and it became all about the money, all about the money. And this is when my dad like sold his soul to the devil. Like, my dad took our childhood home, sold it. My parents got the money from the proceeds. Now, mind you, we all grew up in this home, moved to an apartment somewhere, out an hour and a half away, and then gave the money from the sale of the house to the cults.
Whoa.
And became the golden boy. So my dad became the pet for a while, which made his heart very happy. And you know what? Let's talk about that for a second, if you don't mind. This is the problem with self-esteem and vulnerability. Like, we have to understand that each one of us is valuable and that we all deserve good things. As human beings, we are God's creatures. We deserve to be treated well, at least with basic human rights and human respect. My father was raised in a family that had its issues, and he had daddy issues. To be real, like, flippant about it, he had daddy issues. And so when he was a young man, he was very charismatic, 6'4", all-state athlete, handsome, whatever, funny, life of the party, all the stuff. But he really needed a deep connection with God or with whatever. So he pursued religion, and he was in this group called the Navigators, and it was kind of a conservative Christian group. And he also was he was a high school teacher. He was a coach, track coach, basketball coach, maybe. And this was before I was born. But he wanted to be an assistant pastor. And from what I understand, he was going to be the assistant pastor at this Lutheran church in their town where I was raised. And kind of at the last minute, the church didn't have the funds to pay him as an assistant pastor. So he was distraught. He was like, this is my life's dream. He wanted to do it. He didn't get the job. One of his friends in the Navigators told him, like, you got to come and see this guy, Rama Behera. He's, preaching a very powerful message. And so my dad went along, and I think it was love at first sight, to be like, it's kind of a strange phrase to use for it, but that's what it was, because he committed his life to that man. And there's a gentleman that left the cult who had actually joined it with my dad, who felt very bad about bringing all these people in. And he said, I feel bad about bringing your father to meet that guy, because my father apparently said, I will follow this man for the rest of my life. And my dad very quickly got sucked. Oh, because here's what the cult leader said to him: you will be a great man in the Lord if you follow me. And so my dad was like, hook, line, and sinker. And that's why it's so important to understand the value of making somebody understand their own worth.
Mm-hmm.
They don't need to follow somebody else. You can follow whatever you choose. You don't need somebody to get you to the pathway to salvation, to God. God is available to you right here, right now. And my dad just bought it. He bought it, and he hook, line, and sinkered it. And he became his henchman. He got arrested for like doing a chase with somebody who was leaving. It was just the most embarrassing, ridiculous downfall for this stalwart young man of the community. And he lost his job. But he recruited a bunch of girls from the high school class into this cult. And some of them became the cult leader's main victims. So yeah, it's, and I don't, you know what? I just, it's very dangerous to have a low self-worth. And I think that's why it's important that everybody should just work on themselves and understand you have what it takes by yourself to just, and rely on your community, but ask questions. That was one of the tenets of this place, is you couldn't ask questions. There were no questions. You listened to the word of God that came out of that little man's mouth, and that was it. You can't ask questions. And the true marker of a good religion is ask the questions. Be the doubter. Talk about it. Because if at the end of the day, if you ask all these questions and it doesn't make sense, then maybe it's not right for you. And that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're not even allowed to ask questions, what's that?
Yeah.
That's called you have something to hide. That's called this is a lie. Don't go fact checking me. I mean, that's not what we should be doing as free Americans. That's not what we should be doing. We should be fact checking. We should be asking questions.
Yeah.
It needs to make sense. And if it doesn't make sense, don't do it.
If you're getting demonized for scrutinizing something, then that means it can't hold up to the scrutiny.
Right.
So you have to think about that, right? If there's a group that's like, yeah, ask me anything and we'll give you any answers that you're looking for, they clearly have nothing to hide, and that's a good sign. One thing I wanted to say about the self-worth thing is the hard part is when you're born into these groups, they breed low self-esteem. It's by design. They don't want you to have any self-worth. Right. They want you to feel worthless because that makes you reliant on them, like you just illustrated. And so if you're caught in this cycle, it's so hard to break free. So there's one thing before we talk about how you're doing now that's just been eating at the back of my mind because you've brought it up twice now. What is this multiple personalities thing?
Okay, so I'm not a doctor, and nor am I a psychiatrist, and I am not a professional psychologist either. But one of the things that I have studied in I've literally taken classes and studied abnormal psychology because I want to understand the criminal mind better. I was a prosecutor for people that abused children for years, and it was just confounding to me. So I wanted to understand the criminal mind. So I took a class. So when I took this class, you learn basics about the DSM-5 and like the psychiatric disorders and how they're categorized and what the symptoms are and da-da-da. It was very clear to me that this man that led all these people had very strong manic episodes where he would just be on just amped, like, whoa, like just Red Bull and coffee, and he wasn't taking any drugs that I knew of. But he would be going for days and just angry and fired up and laughing and just all the feelings, just very amped high. And then there'd be times when he would be very, very low and just hide, like go and disappear. And it would be, I mean, that's pretty classic bipolar waves of feeling. And then the fact that he had so many body tics, like he had these tics where he would like snort in his nose and he would, wash his hands all the time. And he couldn't be anywhere near any sort of dirtiness. And if he was, he had like his boots had to be washed off and scrubbed with a toothbrush and oiled. And I mean, like the obsessive compulsive components of that seem pretty clear to me, but again, not a doctor. And then I also think he was, sadistic because he really enjoyed torturing children. And I think there was obviously some perversions in there. And I will go out on a limb and say he's a pedophile for sure. Because we've found out that he has abused children sexually, and that's pedophilia, and that's a crime. So I don't know what his background is, and I'm not casting dispersions. This is just facts. He probably had an incredibly traumatic background based on how he acts, but I also think he suffers from some severe mental illnesses. And that combination, untreated, unmedicated, unacknowledged, and hidden, is the cocktail that he had. And I've seen mental patients of all sorts, and it just seems to me as a layperson that knows a little bit about this stuff that those are just some of the conditions he suffers from.
So when you would say, he said, give your money to us, he referred to himself as a plural?
As us, yeah. And so I don't know if he meant like him and the Holy Spirit in his pocket, or if he meant like the mouse in his pocket. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm being funny, but like us is a strange thing because us, he wasn't an us. He was a he, and he was a person, and he was a human. So maybe he was referring to himself and God. I don't know what us was. It wasn't his family. Like he wasn't referring to his family as us. It was him as us. And so that was a very like strange sort of metaphorical thing that we all had to process. But
yeah,
we had to call him brother. His name was Brother. So we called him Brother because I think all the Generation 1 people called him Brother. And then us children just called him brother. But we were all told by him to refer to him as our uncle. And so we would call him uncle, our uncle. So that's what we would call him.
Okay.
Which was also strange, but.
Wow. So interesting. And I guess what everyone's probably going to want to know, and I know that there are limits to what you can say, but has he taken responsibility for any of this legally? Have people tried to press charges against him? How's he getting away with this?
So that is a $500,000 question. And I don't think he'll get away with it forever because we've reached a point in society where now people believe victims.
Yeah.
We have to understand also context. So when those first, there have been police reports filed against him. There have been charges brought. There have been accusations for sure of the different crimes he's committed against children of various sorts. And anytime there's an accusation, there will be somebody that he'll prop up, usually from the young person's family or maybe somebody of the same, like that was there at the time. They're told to lie, and they lie on his behalf, and they say how much of a liar that reporter is, like the person who reported it is, and they will debunk it. And the problem, which is not a problem, it's not supposed to be a problem in our criminal system, is that the standard of proof for a crime is you have to prove with proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And so if you have a person who's complaining about A, and then you have person's sibling who says A never happened, and oh, by the way, the person who said A happened is a liar, that's not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. If you have eyewitnesses only, that you can't prove that case. So it's just kind of been washed under the rug, just brushed. But the thing is that we're coming to a point in time where people will believe victims.
Mm-hmm.
And children victims are especially difficult, especially if they've been groomed because they have been told to lie. They have been taught to lie, and they've been told that if they tell the truth, that they will be betraying the person that preyed on them. And I'll say this, if somebody's preying on a child, especially a man of God, that is a person who's supposed to protect you with his life from that happening to you. And if he's the one actually preying on you, that's truly the worst kind of predator because he's exploiting your heart and your faith and your love of God. And yes, and it's just the worst kind. So that's what I would offer. So anyway, how has he gotten away with it? Well, he's changed his name a couple of times. I think it was in the early 90s, if I were to guess, that he changed his name to from Rama Behera to Dr. R.C. Samanta Roy. And his explanation for it was that this was something that Indian families do, is that they change their names. I don't know why he added doctor, because there's no record of him ever achieving medical school graduation or attendance even. And there's no record of him ever getting a PhD. So I think he put that on there to give himself a little more credence because he was standing up this school in India, allegedly, and then making us all pay money every weekend into a bucket, like put money in the bucket. That's what it was called, to raise money for the school. And I think in order to have the credibility to buy the land and build the school itself, you had to be like an educated person. And I don't think he had the credentials. And so he had to give himself a name that gave him credentials, albeit false, but he had to have a name. So then as time went on, and he got caught up in some business ownership, not him, he always has other people owning the businesses and stuff. But my own father was I think the chief financial officer for one of his businesses. And my father took the blame for laundering a lot of money. And my father actually served time in prison for that and took the fall. And he didn't tell the truth about where the money went. My father did not profit 1 cent off of that. He didn't get paid for his work. He absolutely gained nothing except a prison sentence, and he took it. And then when my father got released from prison, where he served time for 4 years in Indiana, he went back to this faithful following of this man. And now at that point, this man changed his name to Avraham Cohen and sufficiently moved all of these girls and women that were serving him, moved them all out to Maryland, I think Baltimore, Maryland, and now they live in Virginia. And he's got a house full of girls that serve him and God knows what else.
And he's in his 80s now?
Yeah, I believe so. I'm not sure that he knows his exact age because he was born and raised in like a sort of a in a time and in a village in India where maybe the records weren't as good. But yeah, I do believe he's older than my parents and he's in his mid to late 80s. But he's still alive and he's still got all these girls and women living with him. So
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. And we just need to know how you're doing now. I mean, clearly you're killing it. You're doing some amazing work. So let's talk about what brings you happiness and joy and peace.
it's been an evolution. I will say that it's been 25 years since I left the cult. And that's more time than I spent in the cult. So I was 22 when I left, and now I'm 47. So did I do the math right?
Don't ask me.
So I'm a lawyer. So anyway, I started getting therapy after a workplace crying episode, and my HR director was like, "You need to go get therapy," and I was like, "I don't, okay." So I went and got therapy, and I started, and there began my healing journey. So I went to see a psychologist, and I started talk therapy, and I would go maybe like once every 2 weeks or so. But then I just really realized acutely, which I already kind of knew, but like this whole thing was just traumatic. It was wrong. It was twisted. It was unhealthy. It was toxic. It was everything that tears down a human being. So I really dedicated myself to just thriving. And I graduated law school and I joined the Navy after 9/11. And, I thought I was doing great. And then I met and married my husband who had 3 children. And I've been so I have 6 children, 3 stepchildren, 3 biological children, all very beautiful, amazing humans that are healthy, thank God, and doing great things with their lives and are really, really good people. And that's amazing. And my husband is a really good person. He has served his country. He served the city of Chicago, and has just been here for me throughout all of my recovery. So I did a lot of, therapy over the years, but then recently I started working on just connecting myself again to source because I realized there's like this deep spiritual need that I have. I don't know if it's a need. I just have an awareness and a knowing that I'm here for a purpose, and I wasn't quite sure what that was. And I started seeking spiritual guidance and I started meditating and I've started connecting to, what you ask. You have to ask and then it's answered, and you got to look for the answers because there's got to be a purpose for why did I go through that first 22 years like that? Why? Because it's not going to be a waste. I'm going to do something with it. Mm-hmm. And the something I'm going to do is going to raise awareness, help the children that need to leave that place. I'm here for you. I even opened an email address for people that want to reach me, and I'll give it to you. It's called hopestarts1999@gmail.com. And I named it that because hope is what you can have. If you leave that place, it starts whenever you want it to. You have to make a plan. You got to do it safely. But if you want to drop me an email somehow, hopestarts1999@gmail.com. And I will respond to you and I will help you because so here's what I realized. I sat there and I have friends in all of these walks of life that are able, powerful, willing. Not only that, there is a lot of survivors of this cult, and we are all friends. We are all together. We are all bonded because we know no matter what we did to each other at the time, because we were told to, the people that committed harmful acts to me because of him, they're my friends. We're together. We know what happened and we know why it happened, and we will forgive anything you've done. And you've been asked to do things that are criminal. Maybe they've been asked to do something to other people. All of it. Who are we to judge you? You just need to recover. Just come on out and we'll help you. You don't have to worry about anything. We will just help you. But anyway, what is the purpose of the first 22 years of that life, if not to help other people? I'm not just going to sit here and suffer with it. So that's what I'm doing. I'm going to write books. I'm going to speak. I'm going to do what I can do and help people, because otherwise what was that first 22 years all about?
Yeah.
So it's my purpose. I found my purpose. And the one mantra that I always lived by, and I preach it, not a preacher. Look for the truth. You will find the truth. Truth will set you free. Ask for the truth. Don't ask for a certain answer. Ask for the truth, because the truth is a lot of times what you didn't think it was, and the truth will put you on the right path. And then you just have to trust yourself. That was the hardest thing, very much the hardest thing about me leaving. I left out of shame. I left hell out of shame. Shame, shame, shame. But once I got out, I was like, how do I decide what I'm going to do with my life? And it was like I was so stressed out. I had an ulcer. I was like, how am I going to decide? I've never made a decision before.
Yeah.
A big decision for myself. That was the strangest thing. And when I tell people about this, they're like, well, that's odd. Because we teach our kids, like, how do you make a decision? You make a pro list, you make a con list, you look at them, and then you decide with my heart, how do I feel about it? That's how you make a decision. And you just have to practice it. So trust yourself. Look for the truth, and the truth will set you free. And you have everything you need to succeed. You have a brain, you have a heart, you have a body, you have a purpose. You are a unique, loving human soul that God cares about, Source cares about. Open up your shoulders, breathe into your heart, just ask for answers, and I promise you'll get them. It's changing my life. I'm here because I have finally embraced that.
Yes. That's so amazing and so empowering. All of that, just yes. There's so many things I wanted to say. The first being about the decision fatigue. It's so common when you leave high control groups because all of your decisions have been made for you up until this point. And when you leave, it's like, wait, I have to decide everything now. Like, where are my limits? What are my boundaries?
Yeah, right.
What are my morals? What am I keeping? What am I throwing out? Am I throwing everything out? Am I starting from scratch? Who do I want to be? What's the person inside of me? Who do I want to show up as to the outside world? Because appearance is a great thing to play with, right? That's very, it's kind of like a soft place to start. Change your hair, dye your hair. A lot of times people get like colorful hair or something, or like get a little tattoo that's meaningful. Whatever it is to you that makes you feel like, okay, I'm coming into myself. I'm learning who I am. And yeah, decision fatigue, it's a real thing. The other thing is you're trusting yourself and finding the truth. It sounded like a great Linda Listen, but I don't know if you had another Linda Listen planned. Did you have a Linda Listen planned?
Let me look.
While you're thinking about it, the other thing that I wanted to say is just thank you for being willing to be so accessible to people who are trying to get out or who may, after watching this, decide to move forward with leaving, maybe not even this group, but decide to leave a different situation and resonates with your story. I'm sure you're going to get a lot of messages, and I wanted to put your Instagram too, which is enliven_hope_productions for anyone who wants to reach out on social media. But I just really appreciate you being willing to be vocal and be a rock for some of these people.
Thank you. So my listen, Linda, would be, I am not perfect. I make mistakes. I learn from my mistakes, and I can recover from my mistakes. And mistakes don't have to define you. I clearly have made mistakes, but I am here to say you are not here to suffer. Trust yourself. Find what you want and get it. I'm here for you. I'm here.
Amazing. I love that. Well, you're such an inspiration. Just everything that you've accomplished and the way you tell your story, and you're so well spoken and so put together, and I just love it. The whole the whole package of Elisabeth is just an inspiration. So thank you for
so much.
being a light and coming on and sharing your story. Do you have any other final thoughts before we go?
I just have gotten so much inspiration from what you do, and I think that these cults exist under our noses. And in today's day and age, if you see a child suffering, if you see a human being, an adult suffering, just stop and ask, what's wrong? Because you might be the light they need, and just go towards the light.
Absolutely. Be the person that speaks up. If anything seems off, be the one who could potentially save that child.
Yep.
Well, thank you again. Really appreciate you
Thank
coming
you,
on and
Shalice.
sharing. Yes, and
Such a great thing you're doing here.
thank
I just
you.
really appreciate what you're doing because we all can do better. And you're doing amazing things. And congratulations for you being a survivor too.
Oh,
That's
thank you.
incredible. And using your powers for good. You're doing such good things here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I know we're never supposed to compare trauma, but I'm like, mainstream Mormonism is nothing compared to some of these people I interview. I know trauma is relative. We all struggle with our own
No,
things.
it is.
But
Yeah,
yes, thank you. I appreciate that. So,
absolutely.
for everyone who is watching, thank you so much. Leave those comments down below. Our guests read them, we read them. They mean so much to us. They help boost the algorithm. If you want to support the podcast, we are going to start doing channel memberships very, very soon. We're about to launch them. So, keep an eye out for that. We're switching kind of over from Patreon to channel membership so you can get some actual benefits within the channel, like early access to videos, special badges, emojis for live chats, special live streams as well. So, yes, stay tuned. And if you want to support further, we do have merch at cultstoconsciousness.com. Some Apostates Unite, some I'm sorry for what I said when I was in a cult shirts, which is our bestseller. And yes, I love when people send pictures in them. It's great.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
Yeah. And then what else? I think that's it. Oh, we did start a sister channel. If you're interested in short form content or you're interested in learning more about other videos that we've posted in the past, we're almost at 180 interviews. This might actually be the 180th interview. So we post about 8 to 10 minute clips from previous episodes. And if you watch those shorts and you may decide to watch the full episode later on, you could do that. If you like these videos, I'll link 2 more down here below. And until next time, follow your highest excitement, be conscious and be well.